Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and we're going to continue now with an ever ongoing series of classic anime reviews, and this time we're going to focus on Urotsukidoji Legends of the Demon Womb. This is the sequel to the very notorious Urotsukidoji Legends of the Overfiend, and it is once again a supernatural erotic horror anime based on the manga series created by Toshio Maeda. And like the original, there are several scenes of extreme graphic violence and sexualized and erotic rape and exploitative nature. So again, just like I did in my review of Legends of the Overfiend, I'll give a very strict warning now. If you are offended anyway by the violence and sexualized tone of a lot of anime, then you may want to be very warned about this entry as well, because like the original, there are very extreme and graphic scenes alike. So this is just a strict warning before we go into the review. So the setup of Legends of the Demon Womb is that we still exist like the original in this world, which is divided into three beings: one of the humans, the man beasts and the demons. And we continue with the protagonists of the first movie, the man beasts, or the beings from the man beast world, Amano and Megumi. And following the events of the first movie, they continue to look over and protect students Nagumo and Akemi. And following the events of the first movie, Nagumo has now been inhibited with the demon power of the Overfiend, and Akemi is there to look over him. And if we go by what happened in the conclusion of the original, we both know that these two beings have a set destiny regarding the ongoing prophecy of the Chojin that was described in the first movie. And Amano and Megumi are there to look over them, any events that surrounds them, and make sure that they're there to protect them in the long run. The story continues even further when we have the emergence of Nagumo's cousin Takeaki, and following a plane crash on his arrival, he later finds himself inhabited with the demonic powers. And as the story continues, he struggles to get to grips with the internal effects of being inhabited by a demon, and we later on see him form a big relationship with Megumi as she builds an attraction to him and tries and helps him cope with these inner demons that he's inhabited. The main villain of the story is Munchasen II, and we learn that his father was delving in sorcery and the resurrection of demon forces in service of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. And later on in the present day world, he wants to continue his father's work and legacy and obtain the demon power of the Overfiend in order to take over the world. So what's good about Legend of the Demon Womb? Well, I actually think this is actually a superior story and actually a superior anime from the original. The pace and the narrative is much better handled, and it's a much more consistent and cohesive story. It's just a much more of a compelling narrative as we see the villain Munchasen go about his business trying to obtain the power of the Overfiend, and we see the great dynamics between the main protagonists. Amano and Megumi return, and the focus this time is much more on Megumi, as I mentioned before, her relationship with Takeaki, and this is done very well. I think it's not a fruitless, flirtatious relationship to begin with. It's done very well, as we all know Megumi will have a better understanding of the demon powers, so they do well here to build a connection between the two. And we actually get good scenes as we've seen Takeaki struggle with the recent losses that he's had and struggle really to get to grips with the demonic powers. We see that Nagumo is very caring about his cousin and wants to make sure that he's doing okay following his recent losses. And I think this sequel does a better amount building its characters and spending a good amount really tapping into their main motivations and their main purposes overall. There's almost, dare I say, a bit of an emotional connection that we see built within some of these characters, and I think the anime is actually better off for it. We also have in Munchasen II actually quite a well developed villain, and we actually get a good time learning his backstory and his motivation, and he actually turns out to be quite a compelling character, and there's a good sequence where we do see his origin and what goes on there. He's actually a well developed villain. When you get a well developed villain, it always adds well to the storyline and makes the story a much more compelling, as he seems to be a very powerful villain. So as I mentioned before, there are still extreme amounts of graphic horror and sexualized rape scenes and intense horror, but it doesn't seem quite as meaningless, if you would say, as the original. It doesn't seem quite as gratuitous as the first one. I think despite the graphic nature, the scenes here seem to be more in tandem with the storyline. So when we do get these extreme graphic scenes, it seems to build much more on the plot and development of the characters, and that's always better. And I think within reason I can tolerate a lot more graphic violence if it adds to the story, if it builds towards the narrative that you're following these characters on. And I think Legends of the Demon Womb does a lot better in having these intense horror scenes, which again, maybe not as scary as such, but they do build a much more intense atmosphere and tension. So what did it work quite as well in the sequel? I think the main downsides to this story is that the characters Nagumo and Ikemi don't really feel as important this time around. There's a strange feel about the sequel because it doesn't seem to address any of the events that took place in the original. It almost is kind of a standalone piece, which sometimes is very good where you have a sequel that's able to stand on its own, but it's just a bit jarring when you're considering the events and the story that took place in the original and how that original concluded, seemingly making out that both Nagumo and Ikemi were important people in terms of the destiny of the world. We don't really get that here. We don't really get much into their relationship and how important they are within the destiny of the earth. And they just seem really kind of periphery characters. You almost could have taken these characters out and replaced them with any other characters and the story wouldn't have suffered any much for it. So I think those two characters are a lot more weaker this time around. The only other element I think to this is I think the ending was a bit abrupt. It was building its storyline very well, but the climax of the story and the resolution of the narrative doesn't quite feel as well rounded. It's actually a lot shorter in its runtime than the original. I think the original ran at about 100 minutes and I think this is around 80 to 85 minutes, and maybe the sequel could have benefited from just an extra 5 to 10 minutes just to completely resolve the narrative, and I think it just would have added a bit more to the overall anime movie in itself. So if I had to give a score for Urotsukidoji Legends of the Demon Womb, I would give it a 6.9 out of 10. This is a superior story, a superior movie to the original, and a very good villain that holds the story for the most part throughout the movie. So let me know what you think in the comments below about Legend of the Demon Womb. Do you indeed think it's a superior sequel to the first one, or do you feel there was a bit of energy lacking in this sequel here as opposed to the original? Maybe you felt that the freshness and the novelty within the franchise was kind of lost as you go to the sequel, or did you feel the sequel was a much more focused and consistent in its storytelling and its pace and its narrative? So let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will continue to deliver more of these reviews of classic anime. And don't worry, I will eventually go on to focus more recent anime series and movies. Please help build this channel by hitting those subscribe buttons, and you can also check out the other anime reviews from the channel playlist on the pages as you go on the channel. So those are my thoughts below on my review of Urotsukidoji Legends of the Demon Womb. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.